A long, long time ago, in a quiet, sleepy little village tucked between rolling green hills and whispering forests, there lived an old toy maker named Geppetto. His home was small, his shop even smaller, but his hands were full of magic. With each careful touch, each precise stroke of his carving knife, he could turn the plainest piece of wood into a thing of wonder, a painted horse that looked ready to gallop, a soldier so proud it seemed he might march away, a doll whose smile could warm even the coldest heart. Day after day, the soft tap-tap-tap of hammer and chisel, the sweet scent of polished wood, and the glimmer of toys waiting on the shelves filled his little shop. Children from the village would press their noses to the glass, their breath fogging the window, eyes sparkling at the treasures inside. And Geppetto, with his gentle smile, would welcome them in, letting them touch the toys, wind their tiny keys, and watch them spring to life. But despite the joy his work brought to others, there was a quiet ache in Geppetto's heart, a longing that no hammer, no saw, no paintbrush could fix. He had no child of his own. No small voice calling father in the morning, no tiny footsteps pattering across the floor, no one to share his stories or sit beside him in the lamplight. It was a silent wish he carried each day, tucked deep inside, like a lantern he dared not light for fear it might never shine. Geppetto set out for a walk in the nearby woods. His boots crunched over frosty leaves, and the trees whispered secrets above his head. As he wandered, humming softly to himself, his eyes caught sight of something leaning against a mossy stone, a log, but not just any log. Its shape was smooth and sturdy, with the kind of grain that spoke to a craftsman's heart. "This," Geppetto whispered, running his fingers along its surface, "this will make a wonderful puppet." With a grunt and a smile, he hoisted it onto his shoulder and carried it all the way back to his little workshop. The door creaked open, the warmth of the room greeting him like an old friend. He set the log upon his work table, lit the lamp, and took out his tools. The first curl of wood fell to the floor, then another. The soft scrape of the blade echoed in the quiet shop. Hours slipped by as the puppet began to take shape beneath his careful hands, a round head, a slender neck, a pair of arms that bent just so, legs that could kick and dance. But as Geppetto worked, something unusual happened. He thought, just for a moment, that he heard a sound. A faint, delicate sound, almost like the voice of a little boy. He stopped. Looked around the workshop. The corners lay still in shadow, the tools silent. "Humph. I must be getting old," he muttered with a chuckle, shaking his head before bending back over the table. Tap. Tap. Shave. Scrape. There it was again. A voice, light and airy as a breeze through leaves. Geppetto paused, his hands frozen in mid-motion. But again, there was nothing. Perhaps it was the wind, or perhaps just his imagination. Still, he could not help the little flutter in his chest. He worked on, carving and sanding until the puppet was complete. A painted smile curved across its wooden face, and two bright eyes seemed almost to sparkle in the lamplight. Geppetto placed the puppet gently in a chair, admiring his work. And then, it happened. The voice came again, stronger this time, and before Geppetto's astonished eyes, the puppet moved. Slowly at first, a twitch of the hand, a tilt of the head, then it leapt down from the chair and began to dance across the floor. Geppetto's jaw dropped. "Oh my goodness! You're alive," he gasped, sweeping the puppet into his arms with a laugh that was half joy, half disbelief. Your name shall be Pinocchio." From that moment on, the little workshop was filled with laughter. Pinocchio asked endless questions, pointed at everything, tried on Geppetto's hat, and tapped his little wooden feet to the rhythm of the old man's humming. But Geppetto's heart still held one hope for the boy, that he would go to school, learn, and grow into someone wise and good. One cold morning, with frost clinging to the window, Geppetto made a quiet sacrifice. He took his warm, woolen coat, the one that had kept out many a winter's chill, and sold it at the market. With the money he earned, he bought something precious, stationery for school. He pressed the small bundle of money into Pinocchio's hand. "Here, my boy," he said with a warm smile. This will buy what you need for your lessons. Go straight to school, now." Pinocchio set off down the cobbled street, his little wooden feet clacking merrily against the stones. His eyes darted here and there, drinking in the bustle of the market. The smell of fresh bread from the baker's stall, the shimmer of silks in the tailor's window, the shouts of traders calling their wares. Then, like a moth to a lantern, his gaze was drawn to something new, a bright, colorful circus tent. Painted signs promised wonders and marvels. Music drifted out, full of drums and trumpets. A clown stood at the entrance, beckoning. "Step right up, folks. Wonders await inside." Pinocchio's feet slowed. His head tilted. Before he knew it, he had wandered closer. "You can't come in without paying," the clown said, blocking the entrance with a painted grin. Pinocchio looked down at the money in his hand, the very money Geppetto had given him for his stationery. Without thinking too much, he held them out. "Here." Inside, his eyes widened in delight. Puppets danced on the stage, strings flashing in the light, their wooden limbs clattering in perfect rhythm. Unable to resist, Pinocchio hopped onto the stage and began to dance with them, only to be met with shouts from the crowd, "Get off the stage." But the circus owner, lurking in the shadows, saw something extraordinary. A puppet, without strings. "Such a marvel will make me rich," the man thought, and when the show ended, he captured Pinocchio and locked him in a cage. Hours passed. Pinocchio's excitement faded into sadness, and regret settled in his heart. "I should have gone to school," he whispered to himself. Then, soft and sudden, a light filled the cage. A beautiful fairy appeared, her gown shimmering like moonlight on water. "You should have obeyed your father," she said gently. "But I see that you are sorry. I will set you free. Do not make the same mistake again." With a wave of her wand, the cage opened, and she placed money back in his hands. "Now, go to school. Buy your stationery for school." "I promise," Pinocchio said earnestly, and set off once more. But fate had other plans. A sly fox and his companion, a lazy, cunning cat, crossed his path. "Where are you going, my friend?" the fox asked, his tail flicking. "To buy stationery for school," Pinocchio replied. The fox laughed softly. "Stationery? That little money won't buy much. But, if you give it to us, we will plant it in a magic field, and by morning you will have a tree covered in gold coins." Poor, trusting Pinocchio believed them. He handed over the money, and the fox and cat scampered away, laughing into the distance. Moments later, the fairy appeared again. "Did you buy the stationery for school?" she asked. "Yes, I did," Pinocchio said quickly, and as he spoke, his nose began to grow, longer, and longer, and longer still. "Are you telling the truth?" she asked again, her eyes calm but knowing. Yes, he lied again, and his nose grew so long he could hardly turn his head. Shame washed over him. At last, he confessed everything. The fairy smiled, tapped his nose back to normal, and returned his money. "Remember, Pinocchio, never lie." He nodded solemnly, promising to do better. But trouble still lurked. The circus owner, furious at Pinocchio's escape, appeared from nowhere, snatched him up, and hurled him into the sea. Down he fell, but instead of sinking, he floated. Of course, Pinocchio thought, "I am made of wood." He paddled happily through the waves, enjoying the freedom, until a shadow loomed beneath him. With a sudden gulp, a giant fish swallowed him whole. Meanwhile, Geppetto, having heard from a fisherman that Pinocchio had fallen into the sea, set out in a small boat to find him. But a great wave overturned the boat, and Geppetto, who could not swim, began to sink, only to be swallowed by the same giant fish. Inside the vast, dark belly, Geppetto heard a small, familiar voice. "Father? Pinocchio. My son." Geppetto cried, pulling him into a tight embrace. Tears shone in Pinocchio's eyes. "I'm so sorry, Father. I will always listen to you from now on." The fairy appeared once more, her light chasing away the darkness of the fish's belly. Seeing the boys' true regret, she carried them both safely to shore. From that day forward, Pinocchio went to school faithfully each morning, and each evening, he helped Geppetto in the workshop. Then, one night as he slept, the fairy appeared for the last time. With a gentle touch of her wand, she cast her final spell. In the morning, Pinocchio awoke feeling different. His limbs felt warm, his skin soft. He stared at his hands, they were no longer wooden. "Father! Look," he cried. Geppetto turned, and his eyes filled with tears. "At last! I have a real son." They embraced, hearts full of joy. Pinocchio never lied again, and his nose stayed just as it was meant to be. And so, they lived, father and son, happily, gratefully, and with love enough to fill 1,000 stories.